I have learned that like home ownership is way less exciting than I thought. There's more problems than I thought. It's over romanticized. But my favorite thing that no one mentioned was that you get less stressed about house price changes because you're with them. You're in the rip. The Aussie Fire podcast is a collaboration between Strong Money Australia and Pearler, Australia's favourite boring long-term investing platform. Join our hosts, Dave from Strong Money Australia and Hayden from Pearler, as they discuss all things financial independence. At Aussie Fire, we're big fans of sharing experiences and talking about money. However, please note that any advice is general and does not consider your financial situation, needs, or objectives. Consider whether it's appropriate for you and, if in doubt, speak to a licensed financial advisor.
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Aussie Fire podcast. So today we're actually going to do a little thought experiment. What we're going to do is we're going to discuss what we would actually do in a scenario where each of us has received a $1 million windfall. We're going to talk about what we would do under our current situation, and then we're also going to talk about what we would do with that same money if we were young and renting, or if we were older and we were a retiree, and all sorts of things in between. So we're going to actually break all of those different scenarios down and see what we can come up with. So it should be a fun experiment.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Welcome to our first studio, Dave. It's pretty exciting to be here. For those of you who are tuning in on YouTube, you'll actually see us in a real space together. Fun fact for our listeners, this is actually the first time that Dave and I have seen each other since 2019. We've met really briefly in every Aussie Fire episode that we've done to date. We haven't met up. So I'm enjoying my time here in Perth, hanging out with Dave, is the point, but looking forward to jumping into it.
Yeah, so it should be good. What's that, 6.5 years since we met in person? Every other podcast that we've done has been on Zoom and Riverside and things like that. Yeah. So yeah, it should be good.
Yeah, awesome. I think a quick thing for our listeners is obviously the scenario we're talking about where you stumble upon $1 million. You know, if you were to stumble upon that money, maybe it's inheritance, maybe you got really lucky at the casino or something. It is important that you still apply some pretty common sense principles to it. Like, you obviously don't want to go and do anything with it that you don't understand. So if you have spent very little time thinking or wondering about Bitcoin, now's not a great time to go put $1 million into Bitcoin. Don't go and do anything brash. The money's still going to be there in 3 months. You don't have to kind of sort it out the next couple of weeks. And it's also okay to do it in chunks or slowly over time. You know, if you do decide you really want to do something like invest in ETFs, you can do that gradually over time. So it's a good lesson, whether it's $1 million. Obviously, $1 million sounds absurd to a lot of people, but same rules apply if, 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand that people might stumble upon for good luck.
Yeah, I think that's worth mentioning, because when it's something like $1 million, obviously people would then start potentially worrying about the opportunity cost of not having that money invested sooner, especially if they've already started investing. But it's also worth remembering that it does make a lot of sense to not put pressure on yourself to make that decision immediately. Like, don't let the money burn a hole in your pocket, let's say.
Yep.
And so you can just park it in a bank, park it in what would have to be multiple high interest savings accounts, and then the money's going to earn something in the meantime, right? Before you decide on what exactly you want to do and what's going to make sense for your situation.
Yeah, for sure. So what would you do with $1 million?
All right, first of all, let's maybe unpack what I would do in my current situation. Yep. So if I was to receive $1 million right now.
As like a financially independent retired person.
Yeah, so that's the context, I guess, right? So in that situation, I could technically just add it to my portfolio. The money is kind of surplus to what I need to be financially independent. So I could approach things a little bit differently, but I would say, like, I'm a fairly boring character, I would say, in the sense of I'd probably put most of it into my current portfolio, right? I would say that I'd invest a good 80% of it into my 2 index funds, which is fairly simple. And that would get rid of most of the money. And as for whether I'd lump sum or dollar cost average, I think I would probably lump sum it, because if it turned out to be a poor timing, like an unlucky sort of timing error, and then the market went down 35% or something like that over the next 6 months, let's say, I'm not really going to stress about that too much, because 1, I couldn't have known, and 2, the wealth is kind of surplus to my needs. So it being like a less optimal outcome is not really detrimental, if that makes sense.
I think it's also hard to not lump sum something when you really know you want to do it. Like I had this experience with the debt recycling element. Like I'd thought about it for months and I really come to the conclusion this was 100% what I wanted to do. And then I started to dollar cost average it. And then like 3 weeks in, I was like,
You couldn't wait.
I know what I'm like. I want to do this.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to get comfortable with it. I just want to do it. And I realized that it was actually nearly stressing me out thinking about not doing the thing I wanted to do. Because then if I did miss some market movement, I'd be like, I already wanted to be there in the market.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't like unsure what's happening. Like if I was to buy Bitcoin today, I'd definitely buy like $100 of it and wait a few weeks and then buy another $100. That's because I don't really know if I like Bitcoin. I don't think I do.
Yeah.
But, you know, so that makes sense about the lump sum. You said 80% goes into the investments.
I think so. Yeah.
What's the other 20%?
Well, like I'm saying at least 80%.
Oh, okay.
And then if there's, what would that be, 200 grand left, I might keep a little bit more cash just because it becomes, I don't know, because I run like a very low level of cash like all the time.
Yeah. Do you sell out or do you just live off dividends?
No, like the dividends would be enough.
Yeah, okay.
But we've also got part-time income coming in as well. So we don't really need to
Would
sell.
you buy any like fun expense to make the $1 million feel fun?
As in,
Like a second car or put a pool in the backyard? That's a very Perth thing to do, isn't it?
jet ski. Lifestyle expenses, I don't know. We'd probably just, because our wealth would be higher, we'd probably just spend a little bit more maybe on travel and those sorts of things. Maybe a bit sooner because that is coming up. But I would say probably it would just maybe bring some of those things forward. You could just start spending some of the income, right? Just start spending the cash flow from that $1 million. But so I might keep a little bit extra cash. And then I might look for something else slightly interesting to invest in, whether it was like maybe I add an emerging markets ETF or something to my portfolio because it's a bigger portfolio now and maybe I think that's complementary and then worth it because the dollar figures involved are bigger. Or then maybe I add something like something speculative on the side, like I go look for some sort of angel investing thing to invest in or put a chunk of money in Bitcoin or something like that, something different.
It's really interesting you say that because like for a lot of people who are listening to this who aren't in, I guess, the startup or tech space, one of the biggest companies that invests in startups in Australia is called Blackbird. You know, I've known them for a while very loosely. And, you know, it's a simple company. Rich people give them their money. And then this company goes and puts it into like dozens of startups. And then over a 10-year period, the rich people get very rich. You know, because the startups grow. Enough startups grow in it.
Yeah, because the startup figures are amazing, aren't they? Right, to the point where it's like if is it 1 in 10 or 1 in 20, they're going to make up for like 9 losses or like 19 losses, right? Because one of those, like 1 or 2 of those companies in the 10 or 20 are going to do really, really well over the long term, right? So it's kind of like this, because that happens in the stock market, but it's kind of even more magnified, I think, with startup companies, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just having a look. It's like Blackbird invested $250,000 into Canva when they started.
Oof.
And let's imagine, you know, that might have been, I have no idea, call it 5%, 10%, something like that. Canva's worth $40 billion.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Back to the investors. But anyway, my point was, I went and looked on their website because I was having this day where I was like, oh, maybe it's finally time. You know, I've saved up a bit of money. Maybe I can finally put some money into other startups, you know, because it's a great like long-term bet generally. And I had a look on their website and they said the minimum entry point is 500 grand.
Oh, wow.
It's the minimum amount of money they'll take from people.
Okay.
And it's just funny that we're talking about $1 million because you reminded me of like, I forget that once people actually have a large enough pile of money, they're suddenly able to do different things.
Yeah.
You know, not saying you'd do that because obviously that's quite a bet.
That's a lot, yeah.
You know, but it is suddenly worth remembering. And, you know, for those of you who are listening and haven't seen it before, if you Google like wholesale investor rules, you know, basically it's the funniest thing, once you get rich enough, you can suddenly invest in other things because the government basically lets people like you and I not invest in certain things because they consider us not rich enough.
To protect us from ourselves.
Yeah, to protect us from ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm pretty sure you can't invest in Blackbird anyway unless you like pass the test. And I think the test's like $250,000 a year in income for 2 years, or it's like $2.5 million in
You're a
in
sophisticated investor. They call
Exactly.
it.
Yeah. And it's like, maybe wholesale was the wrong word, but sophisticated investor is the thing to Google. And, but anyway, it's interesting that if you do stumble upon piles of money, sometimes maybe you could talk to a professional about it. It's like there are new things that exist out there.
And isn't there, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there also the same thing but applied on a micro scale, like micro investing in startups, if that's the right term to use, where you don't have to, where it's not like 250 or 500 grand, where you can invest like 10 grand or 50 grand.
I could be wrong. I still think you need to be a sophisticated investor, but there are definitely different investment companies out there.
Okay.
Blackbird's the big one in Australia. But like one of the companies that invested in my startup, Perla, they're called 1013 and like TEN13. And they like more, you pick your startup, and I think they have a much lower amount, might be like 100 grand or something.
Okay, yeah.
But the downside is a lot of people that, you know, put money in that might be more specific. It's just very interesting as a topic, but you know, you have reminded me that, yeah, I guess with those piles of money, there might be, or it might be, you know, your cousin starting a business and you like really believe in your cousin.
Yeah.
They've done your whole life. They've just nailed everything they've ever done. They've got the best idea. They're going to make sourdough pizza and you're just like, it's going to be a hit. And, you know, you take 10% of it and you say, let's take a punt on that. But I guess the point of it is like some people might want to take longer term punts with a small, maybe it might be Bitcoin for some people. Maybe it might be NVIDIA stock. Maybe it might be kind of something interesting like that. Can I ask a question though about the portfolio?
Yeah, sure.
You said you put 80% in the portfolio because you already have enough dividends to live. Would you ever be motivated to put more of that 80% shifted towards high growth or a different strategy, because you don't need more dividends, right, at this point?
Yeah, I do think that makes sense. That's kind of an approach that we're doing anyway.
Sure, as your part-time income
I was trying to get to 50-50 with the portfolio of like 50% Aussie, 50% global. But then as if your wealth gets bigger and bigger, then it does make sense. Maybe not only from a tax perspective in terms of it's more efficient, you know, capital growth versus income, especially if your tax bracket's getting up there. But then also from a diversification standpoint as well, it can start to make sense. I would probably start skewing more growth. Then that would start to make sense. Otherwise, yeah, you're going to start creeping into higher and higher tax brackets for income that you don't super need.
It's so interesting, isn't it, with dividends? How like the more dividends you get over time, the less powerful each dividend dollar is because of it's just income.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to. Yeah. It's kind of like water, right?
It's a good problem to have, to be clear.
Yeah.
We're not lamenting it. I mean, you know, if you were paying like 37% tax bracket on dividends, you're having a great life.
Yeah, I mean, like the first 50 grand of dividends is like, wow, this is the best thing ever. But then if you're like imagine you're at 200 grand and then it goes to 250, like, I don't need that much dividends now.
Yeah, you probably don't need the cash anyway, let alone paying 45% tax on it.
Yeah, so other things do start to become more attractive. There are some interesting options that you could take more risk with smaller parts of the portfolio. But that's just me, mate. I'd like to hear how you would allocate the $1 million in your current scenario, and then we'll move on to what if we were in different scenarios.
I think I can answer that in two parts. I think firstly, when I was younger, maybe like 5 years ago, I'm like 32 now, probably would have just put it in ETFs. Probably just would have put it in ETFs and been like, yay, lots of money invested straight up. I probably would have dollar cost averaged it in because I'd be trying to get comfortable with it. I don't think I would have gotten into property. For me, I think a lot of like particularly investment property.
Even if you had $1 million back then, you wouldn't have gotten into property. That's a super interesting take.
I feel like for me, property hinges a lot of my income as an investment property because the effects of the capital gain discount, the effects of capital gains, which you pay a lot on a leveraged asset, as well as negative gearing, a lot of properties are negative gearing. The benefit of that is proportional to how high your income is, you know, I see to some extent.
Okay.
So it's like, the higher your income goes, the higher you get drawn to that a little bit, as opposed to just taking cash and putting it in ETFs. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think if I go back like, you know, 5 or so years, a bit more, I had like 20 grand a year of income. It's like the ETFs are just ETF money. It's very simple. And I don't think I would have the same kind of confidence in the economics of investment properties, particularly that, you know, I probably wouldn't buy something massive because I wouldn't have the income for it in the first place anyway.
You could have bought an apartment with cash though. Would that have been appealing?
I might have considered that, but that would have been a bad move. Apartments annoy me. Strata annoys me.
So what about your current situation? What would you do?
I think I would be really motivated to try and use the money to, this is ignoring Perla for a second, because like Perla's big enough now that if I had $1 million, they don't want my money a bit. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's not going to change much.
As in if you were to invest that money into Perla. Is that what you mean?
The amount of money people invest into Perla is way more than that. So it's like me putting $1 million into Perla is a bit of drop in the ocean for the company. The company is going to be fine without it. And it would just add a lot of stress onto me because I already have like kind of most of my life hedged on the company, right? But what I would probably do with the $1 million is like, maybe a better one's like, imagine I get this money after my life with Perla. imagine I quit Pearler today or Pearler becomes successful and I don't need to work there anymore. I would probably try and start a business with it in some way. I'd probably either try and like get into content, or I'd try and start a different business or try and solve a different problem. And I would use the money to pretty much pay to solve problems, like whether it's staff, like I genuinely consider spending, this sounds crazy, I genuinely consider spending the money to actually just get someone to help me with stuff, like I've been talking to you about it. Like I've been wanting to put out these educational videos for a while, in my own time. Has nothing to do with Pearler. It's just like a passion project of mine. And I don't think I'm going to make money off it either. I'm just doing it because I love it. But it's like, I haven't done any of it. I haven't published anything in 6 months because I'm so busy with my company. And I'm always like, man, it'd be so nice to have more money so I could just pay someone to like edit the videos or to like organize something or to plan something out, because I see it. I have a company where I have people do that stuff.
Yes.
For me, like for people watching this, it's like, I didn't book this studio today. We have like staff at Pearler who help Dave and I book a studio. And I'd probably use the money to try and think entrepreneurial. And I was telling you about this before the recording, was like, there's this guy we know, me and my co-founder Nick know, called Charlie Gearside. Name is spelt like you'd expect. Really interesting guy. And he started a very successful business that a lot of you know of, either Koala Mattresses or Juniper, Pilot, some of these different brands, health brands in Australia. And, he's been talking a lot recently. He's been on the internet doing influencery type stuff. And he's been talking a lot about like, if he had money, he would try and like not buy property. He wouldn't try and like, he would just try and like do good in business, like start his own business, whatever it is. Because he kind of talks about the differential now between like what you can achieve starting your own business versus becoming a wage slave has like never been bigger. It's like, his idea.
Is that mostly, would you say, or from your interpretation, due to the kind of leverage and scale benefits of the internet?
I think that's part of it. I think there's other things like the ability to self-learn's never been easier.
Yep.
There's a guy in the US who comes up on my feed a lot called Scott Galloway, who says like, all you need now is the phone and the internet to make money. That sounds very snake oily. I hate saying that.
Yeah. It sounds a bit too cheesy.
Sounds out there someone doing a multi-level
but it is also
marketing.
true at the same time that you can, like, that's all you need technically to start.
Isn't it crazy
something out of nothing
that you can just learn? Like I've gotten to the point now where when I'm driving for 20 minutes, I'm annoyed that I just want to ask ChatGPT things.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to be like, hey, why is NVIDIA so big? And like, how's the Australian stock? I'm just like, I have these questions. So I'm slowly realizing there's just information out there and things I can learn. And I could ask, how do I start a business? And I could ask like, why is this business risky? I want to start a competitor to Messina. What are the challenges? Like, it's so accessible if people try. And I'm not great at it.
And there's no limits really to what information you can kind of pull.
Yeah.
People might say that there could be questionable information, but because you can just continually question the information that you're getting, and then you're probably going to learn more just from continually questioning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like there's probably never been a better time to be entrepreneurial. I'm not naturally entrepreneurial, to be clear. This isn't some like me selling myself, because I'm very risk averse and sheepish and anxious, generally. Starting Pearler with someone else was a lot for me.
As in, yeah. So you probably wouldn't have had the bravery, let's say, to start a company by yourself back then.
For sure. And I also wouldn't have had the financial security.
Yeah, sure.
Like I have enough money now that I could lose my job and not have kids and be okay. That's how I'd think about it,
Yep.
The kids part's more complicated, but it's like, so it's like, I'd be like, wow, cool. I think I know enough and I could start a business and something like that. Or I was talking to Dave about this before the episode too, is like, even just how Dave writes books. Like imagine like you're a good example. Like I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to write more and I'm going to pay people to do research for me so I can write more. Because I bet you spend time when you write books. I haven't talked to you about your books. You probably spend time researching stuff.
Yeah.
Googling things.
Even for an article and stuff
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
And imagine if you had like people who did that work for you. It's like you could produce more, and then you could, like, that's the kind of thinking.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's such a cool idea. But I probably wouldn't spend like $1 million on that. It would probably more be like a subset of it, but hopefully not a trivial subset. I'd probably give myself a timeline and be like, I've got like $300,000 or $400,000 to spend in the next 2 years, probably mostly on staff or services to help.
Yeah.
And if I can't get where I want to be in that time, I just say that life's not for me.
And would you say that most of that money and that effort would be directed towards this passion project that you mentioned, or would it be like maybe starting a different company? Or would you just try a bunch of things?
Yeah, I'd probably try a bunch of things. Yeah. To be honest though, you'd probably sit on it for a while. I think I definitely see a lot of people with business, they'll like just go at something and not have really thought about it and spend a bunch of cash on it.
Yeah.
And it's like you'd sit with it for a while. and you try some stuff maybe for free and then something would click and then you'd be like, oh, this can scale. You know, we talk a lot about it in marketing as the idea that like what you're trying to do in marketing is you try different stuff. You put out some reels, you put out some bus ads, you put out whatever, and then you notice something works. Once something works, then you just
Double down on
cash
it.
into it.
Yeah.
You know, and you just like rocket it up. And I think it'd kind of be similar. Like, you know, you write books, you write blogs, you do podcasting, you do lots of content. And then you start YouTube and you do these things. And then you just notice one of them's really picking up and you're like, yeah, we're going to go hard on YouTube, make that work. So that's probably the approach, is it'd be quite measured and you just have the capital ready to make it work. Because we've talked about YouTube before, because I'm like, Dave, you should go on YouTube, because everyone loves Dave, right? And like, you're like, oh, it's too much effort.
Just the time, man.
Yeah, imagine
too
editing.
much time. Oh.
Yeah, if I ask Dave too many questions, he gets exhausted. But yeah, no, so to be something like that, patience, and then just having money aside to solve your problems.
That's interesting, because I would classify that as a somewhat aggressive, somewhat high risk approach to take with that $1 million. Because technically, as a risk averse person, you would be like, because you have a mortgage, right? So technically, the risk averse person would then usually gravitate towards paying off their mortgage and getting out of debt. So then they have, you know, lower expenses and that sort of thing. And then they probably would add to their ETF portfolio. That would be like the low risk averse person. That's what they would do. So it's very interesting that you would then go on the other end of the spectrum and say that you would invest almost exclusively for sort of high growth or an aggressive entrepreneurial.
Yeah. But I think this comes back to, you know, we did this episode a long time ago on mindsets of abundancy and scarcity. And it's like, you know, growing up in a fairly financially constrained household, I was always scared of not having much, because there was like, everything was stress all the time. And it's like, you know, I've been doing programming, software engineering professionally for like, I don't know, 12, 13 years now. Like, I know I'm going to have a job, you know, and that's like crazy. And, you know, it's this whole thing about like, you know, people get rich not because they have money, it's because they have the belief that money will come and then they take risks, right? And it's like, I have a lot of friends that have a lot more money than me because they had rich youths.
Yeah.
Well, their parents had money, so they just went and did a bunch of crazy stuff.
Yeah, because they knew in the back of their mind
they're like,
things would
"It'll be
never
okay."
turn out terribly.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I'm slowly getting to that point, and you know, that's just the minor punishment of like having had a poorer childhood, is that it just takes you longer to get there. And there are people out there who had way worse than me who will take even longer to get there, or have had even worse circumstances in adulthood than they never get there, kind of thing. So yeah, it's funny. It's like, it's not that, because in my head, I'm just like, that's fine. I would just figure out how to make more money. Whereas when I was 25,
Interesting.
I was like, there might not be more money.
Yeah.
It just evaporate. No one will ever want to give me a cent anymore.
So you've developed an abundance mindset over time, as you've proven to yourself that you've not only built up wealth, but then you've developed more belief in your skills and the longevity of those skills.
I see this a lot with honestly tradies and stuff, like blue collar workers now.
Yeah.
Because they just know there's an endless amount of work.
Yeah.
Like if you're an electrician right now, you're not worried about
having
no
work in
money.
6 months. Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you stumble upon money and you're already making good money, like as a sole trader or something, you're just going to be like, it's fine if I accidentally burn some of it because I'll be okay. But if you're sitting there right now working a job at reception for a medical clinic, and you keep reading about AI in the news right now, I doubt you're going to take part of $1 million and be like, I'm going to go be entrepreneurial. You're going to be like, I need to pocket that money and save for the rainy day for sure.
Yeah, okay. And so how about lifestyle, mate? Would you tell me what you would do in that sort of, would you alter your lifestyle at all? Would you buy a nicer home? Would you do more travel? Would you spend more going out to eat? Would you?
I don't have any spicy answers for you, but I get into this argument a lot with people. So I love that I get a chance to be so vocal about it. But it's like every decision you make is about your net wealth, is based on your net wealth. And everything else you do, whether it's income or inheritance, all that's doing is driving up your net wealth. So like if I stumbled upon $1 million for some reason, which would be crazy, then I would probably spend more. But that's not because I stumbled upon $1 million. It's because my net wealth would just be higher. So like if it took me like 8 years to make $1 million and build up my net wealth by $1 million, that'd be the same point as if I stumbled upon $1 million now.
But that's the same thing though. That's the same thing as saying, if I have $1 million more now today, I'm going to spend more now today because my net wealth is higher. So then that must mean you would direct it towards places that you want to spend money.
I
you
would
just don't
spend
have
more
anything
money.
specific in mind.
Yeah. And I'm just explaining, like, I think this, I'm probably more getting to the point of like some people's salary doubles and then they think I'm going to spend more because I've got double the salary. Or they say, had no money and now I have a spare $1 million. I got a bonus of $1 million. It's like, that's a bad way to think about it. You don't think
That's
in
how
those
I think
terms.
about it.
Oh, well, I just
Because it's bonus.
well, no, that's my point. I think that's bad. Is you just put it in the pool, and the pool's bigger, and then you think of the pool. So yeah, there'd be lots of little things for sure. Like I think I've crossed the threshold now where I'll pay tolls, but I've not crossed the threshold where I'll get Ubers.
Oh, okay. It's interesting.
But like one day I'll get Ubers, I'm sure.
You know, we spoke about mental accounting a few episodes ago, mate.
Yeah. Now I'm just like a $5 toll, but whatever.
Yeah, okay.
Whatever.
It's interesting. We better actually wrap this episode up pretty soon because I got my parking meters ticking outside, mate. I had to pay Perth City parking.
So yeah, probably eventually, another Uber, and then I always think I don't like Ubers because they're expensive, and then I catch an Uber in like a cheap country, and I'm like, that was great.
Oh man, it's amazing. Actually, side note, I'm going to Vietnam in a couple of days after recording this episode, and for anyone who's been to Southeast Asia, Thailand, Malaysia, whatever, you'll have used the Grab app to get transport like Uber. But they also do food delivery and things like that, right? So I was on there yesterday just to make sure my card had the right bank card updated to pay for things. And I noticed on there, because I updated the location too to Vietnam, and I was looking at the food kind of pops up as what's available at nearby restaurants. And I'm converting the prices, and I'm like, holy shit, like this is like $1.50 for this big bowl of like beautiful noodles and all the rest of it. And then I check, they're going to get you on delivery though. And then I check delivery, like 90 cents for delivery. And I'm like,
really? I'll tell you something really quick. What a lot of people like Australians do is when they get that 90-cent food delivery, they tip the drivers a lot, like $1 or $2, like 100% tip, 200% tip or more. And apparently they're like having problems in some of these economies now in some certain cities where like people who society needs there, I haven't researched this, I've just been told this, but like people who are like doctors or teachers and stuff, they can make more money driving scooters around.
Because of tips.
Because like people from wealthy countries are just, they feel like they should, and then they get the dopamine hit of feeling generous. And they're just like, just the hourly rate of just getting tips from like.
So you're telling us that our generosity as Westerners is going to ruin the medical profession. There's going to be a shortage of doctors in Southeast Asia.
Well, like I still tip, but I think now when I do it, I'm like, this is more complicated than I thought.
Yeah, because everything has its own cascading flow-on effects.
Yeah. Because it can be very easy just to be like, I'm so generous. And it's like, there's more to it. Anyway, that was just a random tidbit. Google that. I should Google it too. I shouldn't say things I haven't Googled much on the internet, but.
Oh, so there you go, folks. If Hayden got an extra $1 million, he might spend $15 on Uber. $5 tolls are fine.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's unpack it if we put ourselves in someone else's situation where, let's say we're renting, because both of us own a property currently. So let's say we're renting. If you're in that situation, are you still going to go the sort of high risk startup route, or are you going to buy an apartment to live in to give you sort of a hedge on the property market or some security or things like that? Or are you just investing?
When you say renting, I'd have to understand someone's income and other net wealth.
Let's say you're earning, $100,000 a year, and you're a renter and you're 25 years old, something like that.
I mean, if I was talking to a general 25-year-old that's earning generally $100,000 a year, I would go and say like,
this is you.
Oh, me.
Yes, this is you.
Oh.
If you're 25.
Yeah. And I could give this advice to myself.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd be like, go and buy an apartment that you don't mind living in with a 20% deposit, and then just invest the rest of the money.
Okay.
Because I'd be like, I have learned that like home ownership is way less exciting than I thought. There's more problems than I thought. It's over romanticized. But my favorite thing that no one mentioned was that you get less stressed about house price changes.
Yeah.
Because you're with them. You're in the rip.
So it's almost like an emotional hedge.
You just don't care anymore. Like I think, I spent all my 20s thinking about it, and a lot of people listening can empathize, but like it's pretty depressing just, being a renter. And then even if you have the money, you look at your phone and it's like house price records in Sydney. And you're like, please stop.
Yeah.
Because then you get existential and you think about the future. So obviously in apartments, like a small apartment's different to a big apartment or a townhouse or a house, but it definitely helps. It just takes that edge off knowing that like you're in the rip.
Yeah.
And then I'd say put the rest of the money in ETFs or something because they'll be low stress. Maybe you won't get the same growth exactly, but low stress, low admin, super liquid. You can get the money out for anything, anytime broadly, as long as you don't need it like this particular week. I'd just say go and live a good life. Like I kind of feel weird sometimes when I'll interact with like a 25-year-old that will be buying this really expensive investment property because they're like optimizing for like 20-year capital growth. And I'm like, it's not a bad idea. Like I'm all for like growth, but I'm like, it's a lot of short-term pressure you putting
Cash
yourself
flow
in.
wise. Yeah.
To have this like theoretical outcome. And there's like a right balance there. You know, and I would say just dumping it all in ETFs isn't the right balance. And I'd say going and buying a really expensive place or a bunch of properties for me wouldn't be the right balance. It'd be like, you know,
Yeah,
find
it's
something in between.
very personal, isn't it? Because it's going to come back to how you feel about different assets, what you perceive as risky versus not risky. Because some people will perceive that putting it all into property would be low risk, even if it's highly leveraged and whatever.
It's very Sydney centric too, right? Like if you're living in regional Australia and you had $1 million, let's say, go buy a house, you know, with that money. It's more just like, you know, use a bunch of it to buy. Like, I think I'm biased because, you know, the thing I bought, the mortgage has been easy to pay off because I saved for so many years.
Yeah.
So even though I had the money in ETFs, I was like, well, if I lose my jobs, I'll just sell some ETFs. I'll be fine. I think that's just such an underrated way to live your life if you can.
That's interesting. I thought you were going to say, yeah.
Depends on your income again, though.
Yeah.
Because if someone was earning like 300 grand,
yeah.
I'd be like, go hard on leverage.
Yeah.
Make it happen. You know, you'll save up pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I was younger and renting, I probably still wouldn't buy unless I knew for sure I wanted to stay in that place for a long time, because I don't have the same fear of like keeping up with the property market. And I wrote an article about this in the last
Of course you did.
couple of months ago. I did. Because it's something that people struggle with, right? And I'm like, well, if you can, and there's numbers to it as well, if you can save and invest, you are going to be fine. Like the compounding nature of saving and investing means that even if house prices or property prices keep growing at a fairly decent rate, you actually end up catching up over time. You're not falling behind because your wealth's growing faster than property prices. So I don't have the same sorts of fears. So if I was in my 20s, unless I definitely knew I wanted to stay somewhere for a long time, I would probably just invest the money and then I can just figure it out later. Because that just, to me, that's going to give you more flexibility. It's obviously a lot simpler as well. You're going to be left with, I would say, it's more cash flow friendly. Like you said, Hayden, you pointed to, there's a fair difference between the cost of owning a property and the cost of renting. So yeah, I'm not so sure about that. But if the goal was something like, you know, I'm getting $1 million out of nowhere, I would like to have freedom as quickly as possible, I would lean one way or the other. I wouldn't do some of each where I, you know, put a chunk of it into a home and then a chunk of it into ETFs. I would either invest all of it and remain a renter, or I would buy a property that I could end up with mortgage free, which is going to lower my expenses massively, which is going to make it easier to sort of semi-retire or do that sort of thing. So I would kind of optimize for that sort of goal.
I'm a bit biased too, because like I obviously went through similar. I didn't have $1 million, but like I had a couple $100,000, right? And I got interested in buying property because there's so many properties under the stamp duty exemption. And, you know, I think stamp duty is a real penalty of buying. And my whole thing was like, I think the conveyancer in my place was like $990.
Yeah, that's.
So I was like, if I buy this and then sell it because it was a bad idea and I go rent again, it's literally like the conveyancer plus the seller's agent fees.
Yeah.
And then when I had actually said this to a friend the other day and they bought a house after I said this, I was like, what a seller's charge? Like 2%?
Yeah, 2%.
Okay. So like on a $700,000 property, that's like 14 grand. So I'm like 14 grand plus the conveyancer. It's 15 grand at risk. I think that's a really important way to think about it for people who are scared of money.
If the stamp duty's free.
If the stamp duty's free, you know, because if the stamp duty's free, then, you know, it's under a threshold in a certain state. You 15 grand's the cost. And I think like I get so nervous with money. And like when you're buying a $700,000 apartment, you think like, oh my God, there's 700,000 at risk, you know, and obviously the house prices, things can fluctuate, but as long as you do your research and you're buying something, you're not buying like apartment 36A 4E on like a 40-story building in like an over-gentrified area with like defects. You're not going to
where there's 7 other towers under construction at the same time
nearby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like simple things. Like I remember I was a friend buying places once and they're like, I like this area. There's so many choices in the same building. I'm like, that's not a nice thing for a capital decision.
Yeah.
Because it can be hard to sell.
It's tricky, right? Because then you have to think about it, or you do think about it like an investor at the same time as a homeowner. you know?
I think you have to. I think buying, I mean, I won't go into it, but like if you're buying a home to live in, you're making a capital decision. If it's purely about lifestyle, you have to think like you have to dip more into renter. That's my take. Maybe for another episode.
Yeah, we could probably unpack that because that's pretty interesting. Yeah, there's lots of different ways you could discuss that actually.
For sure.
So yeah, maybe we'll put a pin in that.
That being
one.
said, I will caveat, I think that view only exists because of the absurd price of property. I think property is too expensive to go and spend $2 million for like lifestyle, you know? I think if property was cheaper like 50 years ago or 30 years ago,
but it never felt
whatever.
cheap. So you're still in the same mental framework of making that decision.
Yeah, another time.
Yeah, we'll put a pin in that one and we'll come back to it another time. So how about, all right, so that's if you're young and if you're renting. What about if let's say you're in your 50s and you're still working and you're not in an amazing financial position, you're doing okay, but you're in your 50s and you're still working and you receive $1 million. What are you doing with that?
Do you own a place? Still with a mortgage, probably?
Do both.
I think housing security starts to become really important.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
I've helped a few people in their 50s deal with that. And yeah, often they just want to, usually like if someone's in their 50s and $1 million is life-changing, I mean, I'm not trying to imply that like that's like a poor situation or anything, but it's like, usually if someone's made it to 50 and $1 million is like life altering, then that person's probably worked very hard or has been struggling or dealt with some kind of problems or divorce or something like this, right? So usually they find those types of people feel more turbulent.
Okay.
You know, like if $1 million is the difference between owning an apartment or having a big mortgage, then just the comfort of owning is like life-changing because usually they've just been through stuff.
Yeah.
And there's security.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And it's not only comfort because at that stage you have to start thinking about, well, if I haven't got much else and I get $1 million, then I could invest it. But then if that's all I have until pension age, then that's going to impact my pension.
Oh, sure.
But if I then buy a home,
Yeah.
not only is that going to give me that comfort and security, but then it's also going to be way more optimal in terms of getting a pension and giving me long-term security that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would probably answer it that way too. If I'd focus on ending up with a paid off home
Yeah.
if possible.
Yeah. I
Under
agree.
that situation. And then if there's surplus, obviously super starts making a lot of sense because it's not that long till you can access it, right?
Yeah. Very short.
So
Yeah, we're all 50 much sooner than we think, right? You're only a few years off, aren't you?
I'm getting there.
Are you in your late 30s yet?
Thanks
Are you
for-
past 35? Or are you before 35?
I'm past 35.
Okay, that's all right. I'll be there soon.
Yes, not long, mate. We all get there. The clock keeps ticking.
Waits for no one.
Oh, all right. Let's take a somewhat more extreme scenario than what we had before. So let's say you're 18
Yeah.
and you haven't even started working yet, or you're about to start working yet. You haven't even decided whether you're going to uni yet. You're just 18 and you get a $1 million inheritance, let's say. You don't own anything. You don't really have that much in the way of skills. You might have done a little bit of work as a teenager, but not too much. Your whole life is one big set of unlimited options, and then you receive $1 million. How are you navigating that scenario?
I love that question. If I was talking to 18-year-old me, that $1 million, I'd be like, put it into, VAS, dividend paying ETF or a high interest saver or something like that. Call it, a dividend ETF. Get yourself the 40 odd grand of free cash flow a year or whatever it is, and use that to completely de-risk these like really critical years of your life where like, you're not afraid to change jobs. You're not afraid to go visit somewhere you want to visit. You're not afraid to take risks. You're not afraid to go get more educated. You're not afraid to like start something on the side and work part-time. Like use that passive income there to, like I wouldn't say go take the $1 million and spend hundreds of thousands of it to start a business or go get a PhD or something, because that's quite brash. But I'd say, if you put the $1 million of capital into an ETF and then you just live off the dividends, the capital's still there. The dividends aren't a lot in the grand scheme of that money, but they're more than enough for an 18-year-old to like not worry.
Yeah.
Like 40 grand a year. I mean, how much is a room in Sydney at the moment as a reference point? You could probably find bunches of rooms within 30 minutes of the city in Sydney for $300 a week.
Yeah.
Which is what, 15 grand a year?
15 grand a year, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
and
could
it's
live on
like-
40 grand.
Yeah. You don't need a job.
So technically you're financially
Yeah,
independent,
yeah.
right?
The power that would give an 18-year-old to have covered all your basic expenses.
Yeah.
Then you can just think about, it doesn't even have to be work, to be honest. I mean, like we over romanticize work and wealth growing, but it's like, even if you just want to spend a couple years working on yourself, getting
Yeah.
healthy, figuring out, you know, how you can deal with fractured relationships in your life, like whatever. It's profound.
Because the whole, it's like paradigm shifting to the point. It's not just like, oh, this mildly improves my life. It's literally paradigm shifting to the point where you don't even have to think about your entire life the same way as everyone else, because you don't have to think about, well, what career am I going to do?
Yeah.
You don't need a career.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to think about it like the standard way to think about it. What am I going to do at uni? You might not even bother going to uni. Like, well, what job am I going to get? Like you just said, you could probably live off that money, so you don't even need to get a job yet. You can figure things out in terms of who you are, what you care about, how you would like to spend your life. And those like big existential questions, which are like fairly scary and intimidating to most people, but you can sort of tackle them straight away. You can maybe live off that 40 grand and spend some time like working on yourself, looking into things that you're curious about. Maybe you go traveling for a few years. You could probably live in dozens of countries for 40 grand a year.
Controversial advice I used to give, like if I met someone who's like 18 and going to go to uni and they were really impatient and they didn't want to spend money getting educated, I was like, because you know at uni you enroll in a course and if you drop it usually about a third of the way through, you don't have to pay for it.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, you get
Wow.
about a month free.
You got to opt out.
Yeah, you got to opt out. You got to click a button. And I was like, all you have to do is like get accepted into uni, enroll at uni, and then just like do, you know, for a couple of terms, or you could probably do it for a year until the uni would probably be like, can you
Wait
go
a minute.
away?
Is it just let me get this right. Is this you trying to get free learning?
Well,
or is
no.
this you like experimenting with what you like? Be honest.
More the former, but like, no, it's not free learning, because the whole thing, the reason people at uni are successful a lot of the time is not because they go to a classroom and someone teaches them something profound, right? Like the quality of education, the average quality of education at universities in Australia still has a lot to be desired, and classes are getting bigger, like one-on-one teaching time's a lot lower a lot of the time. So it's just like, why people at uni get successful is the same reason that, you know, these kids from these freaking private boys' schools and stuff get successful, right? Like, if you ever see a kid from like one of those really successful private schools, they end up having a lot of success because when they start to get successful, all the other people that are successful were like from their high school, and then they all start making deals together.
They
know?
invest in each other's startups.
Exactly. Yeah, because they know. Because they're like, hey, I remember you from
Yeah, he knows
PE.
what he's doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And it's like the same at uni. Is like you meet people at uni, and you meet clubs and other societies. You meet other smart people. So the best part of uni is all the stuff outside the classroom. And it's like if you really are a super motivated young person, you would just like go there, you would enroll in some courses so you get access to stuff and you understand the landscape. And then you just go join a bunch of clubs and societies and activities and go to all the careers nights and like hustle. I don't have that kind of energy myself. I'm too introverted, but it's like there's so much opportunity just sitting there. And in a lot of ways, like uni's kind of like you just pay all this money for the classroom so you can extract the value from everything else around it. So anyway, it's just like a random
No,
hack.
that's interesting, man. Because I don't know anything about that sort of
You do that as
sphere
you're
of
older
life,
too.
you
Like
know?
as you're approaching your 50s, nothing stops you
Yeah, thanks.
from going back as like a mature age student and just like, you know, doing the same thing.
Yeah, okay. I didn't
Uni's
know
are
that
great
at all.
places. I think the values is not where people assume it is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of people still assume the values in the education itself as opposed to the sort of
There's still value in the
ancillary
education. I think it's just
benefits?
like it's probably overstated.
okay.
You know, like a lot of uni nows, people turn up and it's not, look, it's not, I want to be clear because I have some critical things always to think about unis generally, but unis are an impossible business to run because they're super regulated. They can only charge so much to students. They can only get so much foreign investment. People hate them for enrolling lots of international students, but they do it because there's no other way to get money. Businesses don't like to do research through unis because it's just too expensive a lot of the time. Some do, but like we don't have the same culture in the US of like unis are like the powerhouse of the private sector.
Yeah, okay.
So it's just like, it's a rough business to run. Like I'm not being like it's full of awful people, but yeah, there's just a lot of cool stuff at uni. Even if you're not at uni, you can still just turn up to unis. They're weirdly open. Like we're really lucky in Australia that nothing awful's happened on a campus. Mm-hmm. Like no one's gotten like slaughtered, as awful as that sounds. Cause like you right now could just walk into like University of Western Australia and just like go sit in a random lesson. No one's going
Is
to
that a
like kick you
thing?
out. 100%.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
If it's a tiny lesson, they might kick you out.
Yeah,
But
right.
if it's like a big lesson, you just sit there and
Why?
you could just learn because they don't know who you are. No one knows who anyone is. If you're like 100 students in
Okay.
your class, like, wouldn't you be like, hey, who's that guy over there?
Who's that 50-year-old over there?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, cool things for anyone who's not in the space. It's always worth thinking of what you can extract.
Okay, it's interesting. So, yeah, I didn't consider that. But I suppose back to the 18-year-old scenario, I mean, even if you just start exploring different industries and different avenues that you might think you'll enjoy based on your personality and what skills you are curious to learn about, because you might not have any skills. All you've got is time and interests and curiosities and your personality to go by. So like you said, you have to try a few different things. And then maybe you're going to end up finding some meaningful work that way, because you don't have to think about work. Becomes this thing where you don't have a minimum requirement because of your $1 million portfolio, let's say. So you can work part-time and you'll still end up with, between your portfolio and your part-time work, still end up earning, somewhere around 90 or 100 grand, something like that, right? Yeah. But you can focus more on work that you think will be enjoyable and meaningful and something that you want to do in the world and something you want to do with your time. So it completely paradigm shift, I think, if you're in that sort of situation.
100%. I mean, on that note too, if you're a young person who's feeling stressed, cut down your expenses, has the same effect. As a side note.
It's amazing how much lower your stress levels are.
Sell your car if you don't need your car.
Yeah. But don't pay for Uber.
Don't pay for Uber either. Yeah, just cycle. Anyway, another topic.
Yeah. But I think, because I had that question from a reader, right? And they were asking me basically, if I was 18, and XYZ happened, would you retire straight away? Because technically you could live off 40K, you could retire forever. You never even have to join the workforce. And I thought about it for a bit and I'm like, I'd probably just spend time figuring out what I would want to do. And
Dave would have become a writer sooner.
Maybe, but I wouldn't have anything to write about. Right? I'd have to explore things first and try things first. Yeah, I would do it that way. And you can still, pick, because people think, well, then you're kind of stuck in this $1 million situation if you're just kind of bumming along and whatever. But that's not true. You probably find work and things you want to do, which is going to obviously bring you more cash. So you can keep building wealth if you want to as well, and you can end up with a nice house and all the rest of it. So you're not restricted in any way. If anything, you've just got unlimited options at that point.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's awesome. I guess the moral of the story is we'd all love $1 million.
Yeah, why not? Should we mention our donate button?
Well, that was fun. I hope that was a really interesting exploration of, the $1 million question for our listeners. I think it was really interesting exploring the topic from a bunch of different angles, like, what would you do when you're 18? What would you do when you're, 50? What would you do when you're kind of our age, in our 30s at the moment? Lots of different options. I think that was the funnest thing about exploring this topic, is that hopefully all the different kinds of listeners out there have kind of heard one of probably like 15 different scenarios we've talked about and be like, that one resonates with me. And the important thing to remember with this is not, what would you do with $1 million? And then you say, well, I don't have $1 million, so this episode's irrelevant. It's more like, what would you do with spare capital you have? Because the same kind of thing, whilst it is a little bit different depending on the amounts, obviously 100 grand, $1 million, 10 million are all very different things people would do money with. The fact is, at some point in your life, whether it's a bonus from work, whether it's inheritance, whether it's like, money you stumble upon, maybe your employer pays you out a redundancy pay, but you still have another job lined up, all kinds of reasons people fall into like extra cash that they didn't expect. These are the questions that we've talked through that are worth asking to figure out how you can put that better towards your future, basically. But thanks Dave, and thanks everyone who's listening. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us at Aussie Firepod by hello@aussiefirepod.com. There's some links in the show notes that take you to some places that you can submit your kind of questions or case studies as well. And if you'd prefer to reach out to us on social media, because you're a young whippersnapper that loves that stuff, you can reach out to Dave at Strong Money Australia on social media, or myself at Perla on social media. And other than that, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
See you guys. See you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Aussie Fire. For more FI inspiration, head to Perla.com to browse our resources, calculators, and community insights. Perla is an authorized representative number 1281540 of Sandland Private Wealth Pty Ltd with AFSL number 337927. Knowledge is power, especially when investing. So always seek advice and/or check out the relevant disclosure document for any financial product, including the PDS and TMD before deciding. These are available from the product issuer's website. When you invest, your capital is at risk, and past performance is not a reliable indicator of future investment returns.